U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with his Philippine, Japanese, and Australian counterparts on Thursday to discuss ways to counter China's quote-unquote irresponsible behavior in the Indo-Pacific. The Pentagon has reportedly nicknamed this emerging regional group as the Squad. Mobile journalist Merimon Reyes gives us more details on that. Merimon?
That's right, Gretch. On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin held a press conference in Hawaii alongside his Filipino counterpart, Defense Chief Gibo Chodoro. Also present were Japan's Minister of Defense Minoru Kihara and Australian Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. In that press con, Austin condemned what he described as China's irresponsible behavior in the South China Sea, citing the recent water bombing attack against 2 Philippine vessels in Scarborough Shoal.
You know, we've been very clear to everyone, to include Beijing, that the kind of behavior that we've seen where Filipino crews are put in danger, where sailors have been injured and property damage, that's irresponsible behavior and it disregards international law.
Austin also reiterated that the U.S.'s commitment to defend the Philippines through their Mutual Defense Treaty.
And I would just say that you've heard me say, you've heard our president say a number of times that our commitment to the treaty is ironclad, and we stand with the Philippines.
For his part, Secretary Chodoro said the Philippines recognizes the need to invoke its rights in the disputed waters. But he says the Philippines wants to ensure that it would not be put in any situation where the Mutual Defense Treaty has to be invoked.
We are very conscious of the fact that we need to assert our rights, but in a manner that safeguards the safety of each and every member of the Philippine Armed Force, which is the principal actor in the area.
During their meeting, the 4 defense leaders discussed the state of security in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as ways to improve and stabilize the current security landscape. The group, reportedly nicknamed the Squad by Pentagon officials, first met in June last year on the sidelines of the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. The 4 nations also conducted joint maritime patrols in the Philippines' EEZ just last month as tensions with China continue to grow. The quadrilateral group is looking to conduct more joint patrols in the coming months to strengthen their forces' interoperability. Gretch?
Right, thanks for that update, mobile journalist Merimon Reyes. Let's get more insights on the Squad meeting and the growing tensions out at sea. We have with us tonight Professor Rommel Banlaoi. He's the president of the Philippine Society for International Security Studies. Good evening, Professor Banlaoi. I understand you've just come from a long trip. Thanks for making time for us tonight.
Yes, good evening, Washington, and good evening to all.
Oh dear, you're coming across a little choppy. Can you hear us, Professor Banlaoi?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let's try this. First off, your general impression of this new Squad meeting. They're calling it a Squad meeting, defense chiefs of the Philippines, along with its key allies, meeting over in Hawaii.
Well, I'm very alarmed with the formation of this kind of security arrangement because this security arrangement is privileging military action in order to address security issues in the South China Sea. And, based on my understanding of China's security outlook, China will regard the formation of this kind of security arrangement as another way of ganging up against China, and it's part of the strategic encirclement of China. And that's going to worsen the security situation, not only in the South China Sea, but in the whole Indo-Pacific region.
Can it not be argued, though, that what brought this on was the fact that tensions out at sea have been elevated because of China's repeated aggressions?
Well, the situation can be addressed not through regional security grouping, but through constant negotiations of parties. In fact, I'm saddened by the fact that the Philippines is joining the quarrel among major powers in the Indo-Pacific. Japan, U.S., China, and other major powers have their own issues, and we are participating in that quarrel. So I think we need to go back to the position of ASEAN to maintain the principle of Southeast Asia as a region of peace, freedom, and neutrality, and not allowing major powers to make the region as the fulcrum of their major power rivalry. And I'm saddened by the fact that the Philippines is joining that charade. So I'm very alarmed with the current situation now, and putting at greater risk.
Well,
In the
Professor,
region.
it would seem, at least to any observer, that dialogues lead to nowhere. And I guess that's why things have escalated to this point. Now that we have hit this point where things are really getting a lot hotter, what kind of change in tack can we do? What kind of other negotiations can we do? Or would you suggest maybe some backdoor negotiations, since the official lines are very tense right now? What are our options, really?
I don't buy the idea that the dialogue is going nowhere. The dialogue is the path towards peace. If we reject the process of dialogue, then there's no way for the region but to suffer armed conflict. So if you are impatient about dialogue, then war is the only logical consequence. So I encourage all not to be impatient, and to reaffirm the need for greater dialogue. We need to talk and talk until we manage our differences. So if you stop talking and if you feel impatient about dialogue, then war is the only logical consequence. And I don't like that. I oppose that kind of argument. I oppose that kind of mindset. I don't want to prepare for war in the region. I don't want to prepare for war in the South China Sea. I want to prepare for peace. And peace can only be achieved not through military actions, but through constant dialogue, persistent dialogue. And that is what we need.
But
We need
Professor,
persistent dialogue. And it's not going no. The main purpose of dialogue to manage differences, and we shall stop talking. We shall stop negotiating until we manage our differences.
Just a quick clarification, Gretch. When you say the dialogue is not actually going nowhere, Professor, can you enlighten us on
No,
Yeah.
It said that the dialogue is going nowhere. And I said, I don't buy that kind of idea. Dialogue is needed so that we can reach our goal of managing our differences in order to maintain peace and stability in the South China Sea.
Right, but if you're saying that the dialogue is actually working and it is going somewhere and it's just taking a long time, can you tell us again, just to be clear, where is this dialogue taking place?
No, we already made a lot of achievements in 2019 when we started dialogue in 2016. Remember, the Philippines and China launched the bilateral consultation mechanism in the South China Sea in 2016. We started in 2017. And in the span of 2 years, we already made remarkable achievements.
Professor, can you still hear us?
China,
Okay.
yeah, the Philippines and China decided to form working groups to cooperate.
But Professor, isn't the current administration's independent or multi-country foreign policy strengthening our position at the negotiating table? By joining the Squad, it effectively allows China to respect us, therefore, somehow get a fairer deal, a fairer negotiation.
The problem with the current government is that it refuses to really pursue persistent dialogue with China. Things that were done during the previous government. And what the current government is right now is strengthening military relationship with major powers with a lot of issues with China. And for me, that is putting the Philippines at greater risk of conflict with China. Of the South China Sea, it is an issue of territorial dispute. It is an issue of maritime jurisdictional conflict that can be resolved through Now, if we involve other major powers in that, they are not parties to the conflict, and we are involving them in the conflict, and that's gonna complicate the whole situation. And for me, in my own humble opinion, we can only prevent China from what it is doing in the South China Sea, especially in the West Philippine Sea, is by pursuing persistent dialogue with China in order to manage our differences, pursue cooperative undertakings, in fact mandated by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But the problem right now is that both parties, China and the Philippines, are acting unilaterally at the risk of escalating the conflict in the area.
I don't think that's quite accurate. I have to disagree with that. I'm sorry. President Marcos has made, as far as we can tell, huge efforts to try to dialogue with the Chinese side. He made quite a significant effort from the reports that we're getting, for instance, waiting for Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in November in San Francisco just to be able to dialogue with him on the sidelines. It was a very brief meeting. In the end, he says nobody wants to go to war. We need to talk about this. And from the insider reports, what we got was that Chinese President Xi Jinping was cold to him, right? That was from a report that I believe the Nikkei or the South China Morning Post posted based on intelligence from U.S. ambassador to the Philippine ambassador to the U.S., Babe Romualdez. In any case, there have been efforts, there have been opportunities to dialogue. The DFA, we know as well, is working very hard behind the scenes to dialogue. The lines continue on. We know the Philippine ambassador to China, Jaime Flor Cruz, is also working hard behind the scenes. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that there has been no dialogue. On the other side of it, though, you also have China saying that, yes, we want to dialogue and maintain a conducive environment for peaceful negotiations. At the same time, they continue to militarize parts of the South China Sea. What do we make of that?
Yes. Well, if there are talks happening between the two parties, then the two parties need to come out with an arrangement to exercise self-restraint in conducting unilateral activities that are considered to be offensive against each other. And both parties need to pay due regard to their own national position and stop all these kinds of activities that are inimical to their respective national position. So I think that is mandated by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea for both parties to come out with an interim agreement to refrain from doing unilateral activities that are harmful to not only to the region but harmful to each other. So I think that should be the direction of the dialogue that we should achieve. You know, that we have to put a stop to this kind of incidents, because if we don't put on hold, if we don't stop this kind of incidents, then the situation will only escalate to the point of what I call unintended military encounter at sea. We need to prevent that, because things are preventable. These kinds of incidents can be preventable. So what we need now is preventive diplomacy. And, you know, I want to go back to the previous effort of the government from the time of former President Fidel V. Ramos to the time of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, where they emphasized the need for development diplomacy in order for the two parties to manage their differences. I think we need to revisit those efforts, you know, to uphold the need for preventive diplomacy and development diplomacy in order to promote cooperation rather than conflict in the South China Sea.
But how can we expect to negotiate with China in good faith if we see these incidents happening? As to mention, we've never fired a water cannon at Chinese vessels. We have been using BFAR and Coast Guard vessels in our EEZ, and we have been seeing Chinese research vessels in our waters without asking for permission. How can we expect to negotiate in good faith with them?
Well, that can be done. China has it with Vietnam. Vietnam used to suffer the same fate with China, but Vietnam learned how to deal with China. And now Vietnam and China are now talking about shared future in their relationship. So I think we need to learn lessons from our neighbors from Vietnam on how they are dealing with China. And also, we have to learn lessons from Malaysia. Malaysia also has a problem with China. But Malaysia is getting along well with China. We also have to learn lessons from Singapore and even Indonesia. Indonesia has problem with China over the issue of Natuna, but they are able to manage their business. So if our neighbors can do that with China, why can't we? So there are existing exemplary practices that we can consider, and we just have to pay attention to these exemplary practices for us to manage our differences with China.
Right, but none of those interrelations with China, with Vietnam and Malaysia, none of those have actually settled the territorial disputes, which is, I guess, if you're talking to Filipino fishermen, all they really want to do is to be able to fish in their traditional fishing ground like Bajo de Masinloc. I believe the previous president, Rodrigo Duterte, that was his main concern, was just to allow Filipino fishermen back into the shoal. To put it simply, this might take longer than our lifetimes to actually settle. But in the meantime, how can we, kumbaga, Professor, what kind of leverage do we have against China at this point to be able to at least get back to a point where we are not harassed out in our EEZ?
Well, let's go back to 2019. In 2019, Philippines and China already agreed to form a joint working group for joint fishery management. You see? So we just have to go back to the previous arrangement, what have gone wrong, and what are the things that we should do in order to overcome the challenges, in order for the two parties to promote joint fishery management. I have written a paper on on the best practices of joint fishery management in Southeast Asia. China and the Philippines should learn lessons from these existing joint fishery management practices. So we can do it because there are existing models that we can consider. So the two parties should pay attention to these exemplary models that we can apply in order to have not only joint fishery management in the West Philippine Sea, but also apply sustainable fishing practices. Because right now, what we are seeing right now in the West Philippine Sea is the sad occurrence of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities. Okay. So we can address that through by sustaining the talk on that aspect. So let's go back to 2019. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic put on hold a lot of everything, and we had an election, and we elected a president with different outlook on the issue. So we just have to revisit the things that we have done, overcome the challenges, and and highlight the achievements, and let us not put to waste the efforts that we have done in the past. And these efforts were not done only by President Duterte. It was a product of efforts that started from previous governments, from the time of former President Fidel Ramos to Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Of course, it got worse during the time of former President Noynoy Aquino, and it was reopened again during the time of Duterte. But unfortunately, under the presidency of Bongbong Marcos, it seems that we are reinventing the wheel. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. We have already made a lot of achievements in the past. We just have to take stock of these achievements. And to share with you, I just came from Uzbekistan through the support of Liwayway Marketing Corporation. And you see, Uzbekistan has problems with China, but Uzbekistan has learned how to manage its differences with China, and Uzbekistan is now having a very good relationship with China, and China is now part of the overall development now of Uzbekistan. We can also do that. Vietnam realized that. Vietnam realized that, and Vietnam is now promoting shared future with China. Malaysia also realized that. Indonesia also realized that. I have taken the trains from Jakarta to Bandung, funded by China. So the whole Southeast Asian countries are also managing their differences with China because they want to emphasize not conflict, but cooperation. They want development. They want peace. They don't want war. China, and I think that is the direction that we should take as a nation.
Professor, I acknowledge your point about the joint working group. I think it's a good idea. However, in practice, it doesn't seem to work. As an example, in August last year...
Don't be impatient, please. Don't be impatient.
Wait.
Don't be impatient. That
Let me
is the
give you
path of negotiation.
let me give you a real example. In August last year, the last time a Coast Guard boat was water cannoned, there existed already a bilateral consultation mechanism. The point of this mechanism is that Philippines and China should be able to call each other immediately to talk about issues arising from the South China Sea, right? DFA said China did not pick up. So DFA said at that moment, they were trying to scrambling to contact their counterparts from China. At that moment, Chinese Coast Guard, Navy, and maritime militia vessels were already firing water cannons at Philippine vessels at Ayungin or Second Thomas Shoal. So, in practice, it doesn't quite work out the way we hope.
Yeah. I studied that problem. I conducted the research on that problem on the hotline of communication. The problem is that both parties failed to synchronize their communication system and also to overcome their respective security concerns about the communication system. So both parties need to talk on how to come out with a better communication system that both parties can use in times of accident or incident or any type of emergency. So they need to overcome that kind of problem. There are existing technical difficulties, and we need to overcome those technical difficulties referring to the hotline of communication. So we need to deal with the problem and not to stop doing the practice. So, because there are technical problems in the communication system, and we need to find ways on how to overcome those technical difficulties.
But can't it be argued that the past administration tried that route already, development with China, getting more loans, investments from China, and so-called agreements with President Xi Jinping? In fact, President Duterte was blamed for the aggressive island building in the West Philippine Sea during his term. Won't we give them enough? I mean, if we pedal on this, won't we give the Chinese room to be a little bit more aggressive?
Oh, were you referring to the island building? The island building started during the time of former President Noynoy Aquino. It started in 2013. And China completed all these facilities in 2016 before President Duterte assumed office. So the whole facilities development of China in the 7 occupied features in the Calayan Iron Group were done between the years 2013 to 2016. I know that because I paid attention to that issue during that time and even wrote several articles about it.
Okay. One quick question.
But the issue now is we need to move forward. What is the move forward? The way ahead in the South China Sea. Way ahead in China Sea is not way ahead in the China Sea cooperation. We need to go back to the principle of functional cooperation. You know, in the past, that Germany and France were quarreling. They were afraid of each other and making a lot of military preparations in order to deter each other. But now, Germany and France learned how to manage their differences, started cooperating in the area of economics rather than politics. And you know, this economic cooperation established the habit of cooperation between the two countries until they reach the level of security community. Now, it is now very impossible to see France and Germany waging war against each other. Then we need to also follow that line of functional cooperation and setting aside conflict, work for development diplomacy, work for event diplomacy. So, and eventually, if we establish the habit of cooperation, conflict in the South Sea will no longer be an issue. The same situation that Western Europe are now enjoying now. Western European countries are enjoying now.